Welcome to the Pivot Experience podcast, where leadership transformation isn't just a concept, it's a journey we take together. This is where real leaders share real stories about the moments that changed everything. In each episode, we dive deep into the pivotal experiences that transformed good leaders into great ones. Whether you're a seasoned executive, a rising star in your organization, or someone ready to take that next big step in your leadership journey, you're in the right place. Get ready to learn, grow, and maybe even find that spark that ignites your own leadership pivot. This is the Pivot Experience podcast, where your next breakthrough starts here.
What's up and what's happening, TPE family? We're back with another episode of the Pivot Experience podcast, where our aim and goal is to help leaders pivot into their next. My name is Alex Seal, and I've had the pleasure for working for one of the world's most caring brands for the last 23 years. And I love doing this podcast and bringing on guests that I believe that will help give you some perspective, help give you some wisdom, and ultimately give you some tips to be able to do this thing we call life a little bit better. On today's episode is not any different from any other episode that we have. I have a very special guest on the line today. I was going through my email and a very interesting one popped up from a gentleman that has wrote a book, has served countless people, and has really been instrumental in the transformation of the lives of others. And so on today's show, we have the pleasure of hosting Ernesto Gómez. How are you doing today, sir?
Hello, Alex. I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Oh, we are excited to have you. So we have an author, a leader in his space, and I don't want to talk too much about the things that Ernesto is an expert about. I want to give Ernesto the floor to be able to talk about who he is, what he's about, and what are the latest things that he's doing in the space of leadership. So Ernesto, let us know who you are.
Well, thank you, Alex. I could describe myself in many ways, and I've been working for 35 years in big corporations, startups. I used to be an entrepreneur myself, and I kind of changed identity, many times, pivot my identity, to be aligned with the name of your show. Uh, but the thread that I see as a common factor throughout my life is I consider myself a facilitator of organizations of people to get with their essential qualities so that they can attain their goals and unlock potential. And I know this is a broad description, but it has to do a lot of soul searching, and as with any pivot experience, you have to take perspective, right? I've learned this myself. One of the questions that I've always asked myself is, when is it time to pivot? When do you know it's the right time to make a decision to pivot? And I don't have the right answer, but I know that there are at least three elements that I see happening. One is that you have to have a lot of agency because you have to put yourself into the task, do the best you can. And if things are not happening the way you want, you have to first take a step back, take some perspective, going from the micro to the macro, and understand what the system looks like. Is it serving my purpose or not? And then you have to work with your mindset. Is there some beliefs that are getting in the way of me for achieving my goals or not? And that happens, with people and with organizations as well. So, going back to how I define myself, I find that there needs to be a period where you kind of look within so that you're ready to change or adjust so that you can fulfill your aspirations. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. And with my book, I wrote a book called Regrowth, uh, how organizations can can overcome stalling by unlocking their people's potential. That's the line. And I wonder, is there a way to create the conditions for an organization to scale that kind of change so that, even if you're no matter if you're a small, medium, or large organization, is there a common thread that you can follow? And that's what kept me busy for about 5 years in writing my book. And I'm very happy to be with you to talk about it.
No, so there's you've said a lot there, and there's a few things I want to kind of touch on, and maybe if you would expound on. You mentioned that one of the things that you help companies do is basically understand their identities and basically understand who they are, so and then in turn they can unlock that potential and perform at their highest peak. And I can't help but to think like we grew up a certain way, thinking a certain way, believing in certain things as we go from child to teenager to going through college to now reaching this point to where either we're an entrepreneur or a manager. What are some of the common things that you see in organizations and people that are beliefs that are stopping them from being their best self? What are some of those things that you see come up to the surface often that say, hey, you've got to change that. You've got to fix that if you're going to get to where you want to go?
One of the things that I see happening a lot is that uh, we tend to believe that benchmarking is good and well, and we can advance by benchmarking, what others are doing. In a sense, that's good, but that's gonna just make you be as anybody else, not different. So if you go ahead and benchmark in things that are not as relevant for your company or your person, well, that may be good. You're probably gonna be table stakes with your competition, but in the things that you want to make a difference, you have to be willing not to copy, but to do something that nobody else is doing. And that requires a lot of courage. So I think that we have taken the benchmarking, you know, uh, uh, ideas a little bit more to the edge that we need to. Uh, and that's one of the things that I would recommend to question. What things, in what things it's okay for me to benchmark, and in what things I should be different. Uh, and that plays with a lot of things. One of the things that you have to be willing is to fail. And nobody likes to fail, especially if you work in a big company. Uh, uh, your your results are you're perceived as good as your results, so you don't want to put that on the line. But so one of the things that I also happen to see that distinguishes companies is the ability to um, not punish but learn from mistakes. Uh, as long as the mistakes are not really betting the house, I think there are learning opportunities. So that's another misconception. Uh, when you're a boss, you're supposed to know all the answers. You get paid because you are the most senior, you have the most experience, or whatever. But you would be surprised how many times it's just ego getting in the way and not really trying to find the right answers. So in the book, in my book at least, try to establish, what kind of leadership model, I call it stewardship model, you have to have in place so that teams can perform to the best of their abilities. Uh, uh, do you want I can talk a little bit more about that, or I don't know if you have any other.
No, that's the exact question I was going to ask, because you're really speaking my language when you're talking about stewardship and how do you steward the life of the lives of the people that you're working with. I think a lot of times when we're in these positions, whether we're the entrepreneur, the manager, we neglect the systems that we use to cultivate talent. We neglect the systems that we use to cultivate other people. Before you answer that, I want to touch on the benchmarking, and I want to translate that into what my mind here is comparison, right? When you're benchmarking yourself against other people, you're comparing yourself to them. And I think on one hand, you're right. You are comparing yourself to see what's possible, but you can get so caught up in that comparison that you forget about you're thinking about what they can do and you forget about what you can do. So I love that you brought that up. But I am very interested in, what do you mean by systems of stewardship? Like, what does that mean to you, and how does that come across in your world? How do you steward talent?
Well, first of all, I believe that we have been using this term of leadership a lot, And I think that it has served us well, but I think that it is time to add into that role. Because if you think about it, when you're a leader, you kind of bring all the attention to you. You are the one, who shines. You are the one with the vision. You are kind of rallying the troops. Uh, and that has for some time has been appropriate, but in today's context where complexity is everywhere and change is everywhere, you really have to leverage what the team can do, not what you only can do. So I think that I like to use the word stewardship because it shines the light into the team and how you can work with the team together to find the right answers. uh, the thing is, people feel comfortable being the leader just because it's what you have always been doing. But I think we have to evolve into a different role. And in this role, I see four components. Uh, Everybody has to have ownership of what they are going to do and really not being subsidized into, somebody else is going to do this for me. So it's very important to own and to fulfill the commitments that you make when you are going to deliver on the business. Second, I think it's one concept that I call truth versus ego. Uh, we are not here to be the person who knows more and who is always right. Steve Jobs used to say that he wants to get it right, he doesn't want to be right. And there is a difference. Being right means I always have the correct answers. Getting it right means I create the conditions for everybody to contribute so that we can find the right answer. So you have to be willing to let go of your ego and open up to somebody else's contribution. Uh, the third component has to do with the genuine and sincere willingness to help others in your team improve and grow. Uh, More often than not, there is a zero sum game. Sometimes in teams, you want to look well so that you're gonna get all the promotions and stuff like that. But the reality is that uh, when the teams play, they play for each other. I don't know if you remember the Chicago Bulls of Michael Jordan back in the day. Uh,
Yeah, for sure I do.
well, do you remember how the I don't know who was the coach back then, but
Phil
the
Jackson,
well, before Phil Jackson,
Doug Williams.
I think correct, Doug Williams.
Hmm.
He used to say, just give the ball to Michael and he will figure it out, right? So everybody will pass the ball to Michael and Michael will score and they will win games. But they won games, but they did not win championships. So when Phil Jackson arrived, he said, you know what? Why don't we reverse the condition? And why don't we ask Mike to help the team, not necessarily the team to pass the ball to Michael all the time. So Michael began being more of a contributor. And you remember how he used to score the 3 pointers, and then he let his other teammate, pass the ball so that he could score the 3 pointers. And that formula helped them start winning championships. And in the end, it's the willingness to let others shine and help others improve their game. So I think that in stewardship, in addition to ownership, in addition to truth versus ego, this willingness to help others shine, it's extremely important. And the last component, the fourth component, which has gained a lot of notoriety lately, is psychological safety, the ability to speak up and to challenge the status quo. And no matter if you're a junior or a seasoned executive, have the same opportunity to say what you think, so that the team could make better decisions. If you think about it, performance is a function of making good decisions. And in order to make good decisions, you have to have a lot of information, or a free flow of information so that you can pick the right one. So you open up the valves of contribution, and then, of course, the boss or whoever is in charge needs to make the call. But she or he will make it based on quality information that comes from the trenches. So those are the four, at least the four elements that I see in stewardship that have to be present.
No, I love all four of those, and I think I have a statement that I recently heard that may try to tie them all together. I was listening to something from John Maxwell, and he mentioned that I bring my good idea to the team, and the team takes my good idea and makes it a great idea. And I think a lot of times us as leaders, when we take on that early young Michael Jordan mindset, we're playing good, we're performing well, we're doing, we're checking some boxes, but it's something that's missing, and we're not bringing other people along with us. And really, that's the true essence of leadership. I mean, it's steward leadership that brings other people on and really understands that, hey, we can go further faster when we have more people. There used to be this phrase in the business, and I'm sure you may have heard it before. They used to pose the question, how do you eat an elephant? One bite
Yeah.
at a time, right? That was the old saying. Nowadays, it's how do you eat an elephant? Well, you throw a party, you bring more people in, and you devour that issue faster than it would be if you was taking the bites one bite at a time by yourself. So I love this unified mindset that you're bringing to this conversation, this team forward mindset that you're bringing. What are some examples that you've experienced in your professional career where you have seen these elements really shine through, and what are some results that came from it?
Well, I'm going to use an example that probably everybody can relate to, which is common knowledge, and then I will use one of myself. I don't know if you know this, but at first, Steve Jobs did not want to launch the iPhone. He was against the idea. Actually, it took some time for his team to convince him that it would be a good business proposition. He thought it would be better to go with the tablets, and he had some plans to do that. But he was humble enough to hear what the team was saying and how they could contribute, and he even committed without being 100% convinced that it was the right move. But he empowered the team, and the rest is history. He changed the industry, by doing that, which is extremely important. In my case, I was telling you that before being in an HR position in my past life, I used to be in marketing, and I used to be, stewarding brands which are very important here in Mexico and in the U.S. The company that I used to work for, it's present in 18 countries all over the world. So in my case, I was overseeing the most important brand of for the company, and the most not only important in terms of market share, but also in revenue. And we had to challenge our biggest seller. We used to the biggest seller of all, it was a package of ham. Here it was at 250 grams, and I noticed that my team and I were trying to figure out what was going on in the market. And I start hearing about people in taking care of the stores that there were some complaints about consumers having to go often to the store to replenish because that weight was not enough for them to fulfill their needs, and they ran out of product for a day or two. You know, ham for the sandwiches or for the eggs or whatever. And the convention was, no, this is it. This is 250 grams, and this is what we should do. And I was against that idea at first because you don't want to mess with the biggest SKU money generator of your company, right? I mean, if you're wrong, it's a really high price to pay. But the team made a very convincing presentation, and of course I went with them to talk to consumers, and I noticed that yes, they purchased a pack of ham, but on Saturday or Sunday, and by Thursday or Friday they ran out of product. And for a couple of days they didn't have any product on their shelf, on their refrigerators, excuse me. So we decided to change that and increase the size by 40 grams. That created more value for the company than anything I did in my life. Hundreds of millions of dollars just because of valuation, just because of that decision, which was part of a team effort. If I were committed to playing it safe, and maybe my experience was telling me it may not be a good idea, we would have missed that opportunity. So for me, that was a life changing decision. You don't have to be right all the time. What you have to do is make sure that you're surrounded by people who provide you with information so that you can get the right decision.
No, and I'm going to gather the guess, and just me listening to what you're saying, that some of that insight from that decision is came from the trenches. Like you mentioned this earlier, and I love that you said that, because I think a lot of times when people get into these executive positions, they miss what happens in the trenches because they're just looking at the numbers at the top, and it's like you have to know what's going on at the ground level where the boots are hitting the ground in order to really drive insights into effectiveness and how people feel about the organization. And you could find the smallest thing. You said 250 grams or 255 grams
Yeah,
was the
yeah,
standard. All you
yeah.
did was increase it by 40. You saw that, hey, if we just did that little bit, how does that translate into just growing the output for the company? And I would think a lot some of that insight came from you understanding what was happening on the ground level.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's because and actually, my team alerted me because after visiting some stores and talking to consumers, they say, you know what, there's something odd here. People are running out of product, and and they asked. They all they had to do was approach a consumer and ask, how are you, doing with our product? Do you find it useful or not, etc. And it came out of a casual conversation, and all of a sudden that information was so valuable that we started looking into some other opportunities just because we learned how to do that. But the problem with companies is as you grow larger and you add more layers into the hierarchy, you're far away from where the action takes place, and you probably think you're very strategic, and sometimes you have to have a broader picture, but you have to balance that with boots on the ground, as you were saying.
No, I love. I'm really loving this part of the conversation because I think it speaks to something that's close to me. Because as a company starts to grow, the folks who have the most passion, or at least perceived passion, or in those trench moments, and then they grow, they mature, they get promoted throughout the company, and they're away from the core things that really made the company what it was. And you've hired in people, you've hired in great people, you're giving them skills, you trust them. But if you're not in tune to what's going on yourself, or just making the observations yourself, you're gonna lose some of that. And I think I want to take this part of the conversation and go into, I was reading, your book is about helping businesses overcome stagnation, right? And I think that getting into the trenches is one core strategy that businesses can deploy to get out of stagnation. So I want to ask you, what are some top strategies from your book that you think people can input? And I'm not trying to say like that. We not want you to give us the whole sauce. Don't give us the whole meal. We
Yeah.
still got to get some from the book, but give us some of those insights that will help a business get out of stagnation, as you would write in your book, Regrowth.
You know, to grow, uh, and by the way, I call my book Regrowth because if you take a long-term perspective on a business, the business is not really a 45-degree ascending line, all the time, forever. You go through slumps just like people do. Sometimes you have bad years, or sometimes something happens, and you have to really kind of regroup and regrow. So I use that idea to see, well, what kind of reflection needs to happen for for a company to learn from the mistakes, or to understand the consumer better, because growth, it's a function of what your consumer wants you to. I mean, if you fulfill a consumer expectation relative to what other brands are doing, probably you're going to do well, but you have to really be there. But paradoxically, although growth is driven by consumers, the decision of how to approach that, happens within the company. And there are all kinds of how can I say it, beliefs or mental models or preconceived ideas that sometimes get in the way of how do I honor what my consumer wants so that I can do that. So one of the things that I learned is that you have to be able to understand that uh, lack of growth is a self-inflicted wound, uh, because of the decisions you are not taking or taking. And this brings me to one thing that I present in the book, which for me was mind blowing. You know, I used to talk during my years in the HR position with CEOs of many companies, large companies, multi-billion companies, who had very distinguished C-suite teams, the best people educated in the best universities in the world. And I used to ask the CEOs, listen, you know your team very well, don't you? Yeah, sure, of course. You probably hire them, handpick them, and this is the team you trust. Yes, okay, perfect. Uh, Out of the potential that you think they have, what percentage do you think they are redeeming? In other words, actual performance versus what you think they are able to achieve. How would you rate your team? And I was astonished because the answer that I got the most was 50%. I said, what? So you know them very well? Sure. And you think they're just performing at their 50% capacity? Yeah, they can do a lot better. Why don't they? And well, companies, we are very complex, bureaucracy and silos and things, and a lots of processes for approval and stuff like that. But kind of the question is, well, if you were able to let your people perform at their best, what they already have, you can double productivity easily. So that's what I'm saying. It's a self-inflicted wound. So the question is, what needs to happen for people to do their best? And you would be surprised also to find out that potential is a moving target. What you think you can accomplish today is very different from what you think you can accomplish a year from now, because all of a sudden you evolved. So it's just kind of for me, counterintuitive not to let that happen. So in my book, what I try to devise is what are and I signal 4 steps that a company needs to take for that to happen. And that's why I try to the problem that I'm trying to solve.
No, I love your passion. I love your energy. I can tell you're getting fired up when we're talking about this, because it's astonishing to hear the leaders of companies. Hey, this is a team I've assembled, but I know they're only working at 50% because of these barriers, or these things that we perceive to be as barriers that are in the way. And what company wants to operate at 50% of their capacity? Like what?
You kind of get used to it, but because you never question yourself, and you can also ask this question to yourself. You know, what I'm performing, what is the kind of performance I'm achieving today compared to what I think I'm capable of achieving? And all of a sudden, when you do that kind of reflection, you say, well, what is restricting me? Because we know that, well, I don't have time, and I have a busy life and stuff like that. But aside from those things, what are the barriers that you have to overcome so that you can perform better? And companies can do that. And oftentimes, you have the wrong incentives, you have the wrong policies. There is a hard wiring within the company that limits that capacity.
Wow, no, this has been a very insightful conversation, and I've got one segment I want to do with you before we leave. And so I do this with our guests, and this is on the spot. So I got a good feeling I know where your answer is going to be, but I don't know. I always get surprised by a couple. And so there's this game I play called Tug-of-war, where I'm going to give you two words that you seem like in your organization that you can't live without, but you got to pick one. And you've got to tell me why you picked the one. So, or is this something, a game that you're willing to play?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
But so you're gonna present to me two words,
Yes.
and I have to pick one.
Yes.
Okay, go.
Okay. So here are the first words: accountability or empathy.
I'm gonna go with empathy. Uh, as much as I am a person who likes to honor my commitments, and I really want to deliver to the best I can do, I really think that empathy allows you to go beyond the obvious, to understand the reasons behind that may be limiting or aiding a person. This idea of having the ability to put in the shoes of somebody else really opens up your mind to what is possible. Accountability kind of relates to I'm going to deliver on what I committed, but empathy gives you the possibility to uh, even increase that if you understand what is behind that may not be obvious at first, or you're willing to dig deeper into what is bothering the other person, what is kind of a what is the concern that is behind, which could be solved, and maybe we can do things better. And in doing that, you're willing to pivot, right? In doing that, you're willing to you reframe the situation, and then you can choose what's best.
I love that answer, man. Love that answer. That's an awesome answer. All right, you ready for the next two? Innovation or consistency.
I'm gonna go with innovation because with consistency, you never know if you are solving the right problem all the time, the problem you're supposed to solve. You may be consistent and hardwired to a reality that it no longer applies. And you can be very effective in solving the wrong thing. And with innovation, you have a bigger perspective of what you need to do. So I'm going to go with innovation.
That is probably, no offense to anybody else who's played this game, probably one of the best answers I've heard to that question. That the way, bravo to you. That was a fantastic. I have a hard time trying to articulate, because I would pick innovation. That's just because the assessments I've taken, I'm just wired to create and do. But it's like, that was the best answer that I. Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't mean to dwell on that, but great answer on that. I agree with you 100%. All right,
Thank you.
next set: clear expectations or freedom.
You you mean this is in a business setting, right?
Yes.
I don't see how they oppose to each other or they kind of fight each other. But if I were to pick one, uh, you know, you want to you. I'm a fan of freedom, uh, as far as you have set the boundaries, the right space for that to happen. So as long as you, and for that you have to have clear expectations, right? For the boundaries within for the space you want to occupy. I'm a person who is uh, more connected to the human spirit. So it's going to be freedom provided that there are guardrails that help the person operate within the space that it's viable, or at least feasible. Because when you get a lot of freedom and you're stuck with doing things that are no use for the company, what do you need the freedom for? It's going to be freedom with that caveat.
No, I love that. That's an excellent answer. That one hangs up people. That a lot of folks have that same sentiment that you have. So I love that. Here's the last one: results or relationships.
Wow, this is a tough one. This is a tough one. Uh, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to go with results, not relationships, and I'm going to explain to you why. Because achieving and attaining goals and performing gets to be an engine to improve. And I really think that relationships, as good as they are, and you can build a very good environment, uh, sometimes need teeth and need some kind of edge to 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 achieve. And think about this. For instance, in my case, I was never a runner, a jogger. I used to run a little bit, and I started to run maybe half a mile, and then I increased to a mile, and then 2 miles and stuff like that. So results began to become a bar for me that showed me that I could do better. And in that sense, I really think that if you use that as feedback to improve your performance, I would go with results. Nothing, I don't have it. I mean, nothing wrong about relationships, but relationships could need to have, as I was saying, teeth to make that happen.
No, I love that. No, no, that's a great answer. So I want to say thank you so much, Ernesto. This interview has been enlightening. Not only I'm sure the audience has got plenty out of this, but I just loved sitting here listening to the way you think about business, the way you think about tapping into potential, just the perpetual mindset that you have around just continuous growth and getting better. So first of all, can you tell the audience how do they purchase your book? How do they get connected with you? If they wanted to just, reach out to you, if that's an option, how would they do that?
Sure. Well, my book is called Regrowth, and it's on the Amazon platform, in Barnes and Noble as well. So you're interested, you can buy it there. Uh, I'm also in LinkedIn, Ernesto Gómez. I I have a second last name which is kind of complicated, but it's Arzapalo, Arzapalo. Just because there are hundreds of Ernesto Gomez's out there. So Ernesto Gomez Arzapalo, Arzapalo, and LinkedIn. And I have also a website, which is aspenmindset1.com. You can get in there and there's a button to engage. And I just open up an Instagram account as well, which is called Aspen Mindset low underline one, which I'm starting to fill with ideas. So in a couple of weeks, I'll make sure that I have more, nuggets for reflection. So those are the four channels.
Awesome. Well, Ernesto, I'll have to say this. You are my second international interview. I had the pleasure of interviewing a guy named Sean DeVries maybe a year ago now in Australia. And so now, I got someone in the great country of Mexico to come onto our platform and share just an incredible story. Love hearing everything that you said today. Again, I want to say thank you. And TPE family, you might need to rewind this a couple of times. There's some things here, even if you don't get the book, this conversation was rich enough for you to start something. And if you want to really take it to the next level, go get the book. Go support Ernesto. And I think he would appreciate it. TPE family, we've got another great episode here. Share with your friends, family. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Leave us a rating, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about our show. I greatly appreciate any feedback or commentary that you guys give us. It really helps us understand how we can continue to deliver a better product to you guys. And until next time, TPE family, peace.
Hey guys, what's up? It's your friend, Pastor John R. Adolph from the Antioch Church in Beaumont, Texas. And I just want to slip this in right quick so you'll never forget. It's all about progress over perfection here at TPE.
Tap into the Pivot Experience where we help young, hungry entrepreneurs move on to the next step.